the North Atlantic, 1943. At night, this ocean did not forgive mistakes. It swallowed ships, men, and secrets without leaving a trace. The wind cut like a blade, and the water was so cold it could kill a man in minutes. On this night, an American destroyer sliced through the darkness at full speed. Its radar operator stiffened suddenly. A blip appeared, not a whale, not debris, a German U-boat. The bridge fell silent as the realization spread. This was no long-range chase, no depth-charge hunt. The enemy was right there, close enough to touch. The captain didn't hesitate. Full speed ahead, prepare to ram. There was no time for torpedoes, no room to maneuver. Seconds later, steel slammed into steel. The destroyer struck the U-boat broadside with a deafening crash that echoed across the empty sea. Metal screamed. Men were thrown from their feet. The submarine's hull split open as water rushed inside, and then bodies hit the ocean. German sailors, some burning, some bleeding, some already dying, were thrown into the freezing Atlantic. Their submarine vanished beneath the waves, dragging equipment, air bubbles, and hopes with it. But the destroyer did not escape unscathed. Its bow crumpled, compartments flooded, the ship slowed, wounded and vulnerable. Now, in the water between the two enemies, floated men who only moments ago had been trying to kill each other. And the Americans had to decide, leave them to die or save the enemy. Inside the U-boat, chaos erupted instantly. The impact knocked men off ladders and smashed them against bulkheads. Lights exploded, alarms screamed, water burst through cracked seams like living creatures clawing their way inside. The captain knew immediately. The submarine was finished. "Abandon ship!" he shouted in German, his voice nearly drowned out by rushing water. Men scrambled toward the hatches. Some were barefoot, others were bleeding. One sailor tried to grab a photo from his bunk before the water swallowed it whole. The sea rose fast. Those who reached the deck leapt without thinking. The Atlantic wrapped around them like ice. Their lungs seized. Muscles locked. Panic set in. Some screamed. Some prayed. Some went silent. Above them loomed the American destroyer, damaged but alive. Its hull scraped and groaned as it drifted closer. The Germans knew the rules of war at sea. Sometimes survivors were rescued, sometimes they were ignored, and sometimes ships finished the job. In the black water, every second felt like a lifetime. On the deck of the American destroyer, a different kind of battle raged. The ship had taken serious damage. Engineers reported flooding. The bow sat low in the water. The captain knew they were living on borrowed time. Then someone shouted from the rail, "Survivors in the water!" Dozens of German sailors clung to debris, their faces pale, lips blue, hands shaking uncontrollably. An officer spoke sharply. "Sir, they're enemy combatants," another replied quietly. "They're sailors, same as us." The captain stared into the darkness. He knew the regulations. He also knew the sea. The ocean did not care who wore which uniform. If they did nothing, the Germans would die within minutes. If they tried to rescue them, the destroyer itself might sink. Finally, the captain spoke. "Lower ropes. Prepare to recover survivors." Some men hesitated. Others moved instantly. Hands reached down. Fingers grabbed hold. One by one, enemies were pulled aboard. No one cheered. No one smiled, because everyone understood the risk. The rescue began slowly, and then everything went wrong. Ropes dangled over the side of the destroyer. Sailors leaned dangerously far over the rails, grabbing frozen hands and pulling with every ounce of strength they had. German sailors collapsed onto the deck, coughing up seawater, shaking uncontrollably, some barely conscious. But the destroyer was dying. Below deck, pumps fought a losing battle. Water poured into damaged compartments faster than it could be removed. The bow dipped lower with every passing minute. Then came the report, "No captain ever wants to hear, sir, the forward compartments are flooding uncontrollably." The ship was losing stability. Every rescued man added weight. Every second increased the risk. Another officer shouted over the wind. "Captain, if we keep this up, we'll sink with them." The captain looked out over the water. There were still men floating, still hands reaching, still eyes staring upward in desperation. This was no longer a question of mercy. It was a calculation of survival. Reluctantly, the order came down. Stop the recovery. Some sailors froze in place. Others protested. But orders were orders. The ropes were pulled back aboard. In the water, German sailors watched in disbelief as their last hope was withdrawn. Some screamed. Some cursed. Some simply went quiet and disappeared beneath the waves. No one on the destroyer would ever forget that moment. The damage was too severe. Even after halting the rescue, the destroyer continued to take on water. The bow sank lower, waves crashing over the deck. The ship groaned like a wounded animal. Engineers reported catastrophic failure. "She won't make it, sir." The captain knew the truth before the words were spoken. The destroyer was lost. There would be no heroic return, no victory parade, just survival. The order was given: prepare to abandon ship. Life rafts were deployed. Equipment was jettisoned. Wounded men were helped toward the rails. The irony was brutal. Moments earlier, this ship had been rescuing enemy sailors from the sea. Now its own crew faced the same fate. One by one, American sailors stepped into the Atlantic. The cold hit like a hammer. Men gasped, muscles locked, panic surged. Behind them, the destroyer tilted sharply. For a brief moment, it stood frozen against the night sky, damaged, burning, defiant. Then it slipped beneath the waves. The ocean closed over it without ceremony. Another warship gone. Another chapter written in salt and steel. Now the survivors floated together, Americans and Germans. Enemies no longer separated by uniforms or orders, but united by the same cold water and the same desperate fight to stay alive. There was no shouting now, only breathing, only waves, only time slipping away. Some men clung to rafts. Others held on to debris. A few simply drifted, exhausted beyond fear. When dawn finally came, it revealed a haunting sight: scattered survivors across miles of open ocean. Rescue ships arrived hours later. Not all were saved. Many never resurfaced. Their names would be added to lists, their stories reduced to numbers. But those who lived carried something heavier than medals. They carried memory. When the sun finally rose over the Atlantic, it revealed a scene that few would ever forget. The storm had passed, but the sea was littered with survivors, debris, and silence. Pieces of wood, life rafts, oil slicks, and human bodies floated together in no particular order. Some men waved weakly. Others were already motionless. Hours after the destroyer sank, Allied patrol ships arrived. They began pulling men from the water, one by one. American sailors were lifted aboard first, many barely conscious, suffering from hypothermia, dehydration, and shock. Some had been in the water all night, their fingers frozen around pieces of wreckage. Then came the Germans. There was no resistance, no anger, no fight. The German survivors were too weak to stand, let alone protest. They were wrapped in blankets, given water, and placed under guard. Many were stunned, not just by survival, but by the fact that they were still alive at all. Several men died during the rescue itself. Their bodies were never recovered. In official reports, they would become statistics. But for those who survived, the moment of rescue marked a dividing line between death and memory. The German sailors who survived were taken aboard Allied ships as prisoners of war. They expected punishment, interrogation, brutality. Instead, they received medical care, blankets, warm drinks, clean bandages. One German sailor later recalled that the kindness confused him more than the battle itself. He had been taught that the enemy was ruthless, inhuman, yet here he was, alive because those same enemies had tried to save him. American sailors felt the same conflict. Some had lost friends in the sinking. Others had nearly died themselves. Yet they shared food with men who, hours earlier, had been trying to sink Allied ships. War did not disappear, but it paused. For a brief moment, humanity surfaced where hatred had ruled. Those German sailors would spend the rest of the war in POW camps. Many would survive. Some would later return home and tell stories not of cruelty, but of mercy. Stories that did not fit propaganda. Stories that complicated the meaning of victory. In the years after the war, historians would debate the captain's decisions. Some argued he took unnecessary risks by attempting the rescue. That saving enemy sailors ultimately cost his own ship. Others argued the opposite. That refusing to rescue would have violated the deepest traditions of the sea. Naval warfare is governed by rules, but the ocean has its own code. Sailors, regardless of nationality, understand one truth above all others: the sea is the real enemy. The captain of the destroyer never claimed heroism. He never defended himself publicly. His actions spoke for him. He chose mercy in a moment where no outcome was clean, and history remembered that. Today, this battle is barely remembered. There are no monuments, no blockbuster movies, but its lesson remains. In war, destruction is easy, dehumanization is easy. What is difficult, what is rare, is choosing humanity when survival is not guaranteed. That night in the Atlantic, a destroyer rammed a U-boat. Men were thrown into the sea, ships were lost, but something else happened. Enemies saw each other as human beings, not because orders demanded it, not because history would remember it, but because in the darkness, surrounded by cold water and death, mercy still mattered. And sometimes, that is the most powerful victory of all.